Hello, basketball fans. Welcome back to another episode of Baseline to Baseline, presented by the Amateur Agency. As always, I'm joined by Owen, and this week we got a special guest on. John Voita from Phoenix is joining us here. He's a big Suns fan. He's a Suns blogger as well as a podcast host, so we're happy to have him on. John, how's it going, man?
Feeling great. Appreciate you guys having me on. This is great to talk to the great North. Everything good up there? We're 118 degrees down here, so I don't know how you're feeling up there.
Oh, we're definitely feeling the elements. It's I guess we go by Celsius, so it's a little bit different, but it's like 38 Celsius up here, which is I think it's probably got to be around in the hundreds Fahrenheit. I'm not too sure though, but it's definitely
Oy,
hot.
we're
Yeah,
all feeling it. We're all feeling it.
absolutely. Oh, and how's it going, man?
It's going good. Glad to be on here again and excited to get into the interview.
Absolutely. All right, John. Well, we'll just open up with getting to know you a little bit here. So first of all, how long have you been a Suns fan for?
Oh God. I was born in 82, so probably about 1988 is, it's typically when you're about 5 or 6 years old is when you really start to develop a connection with a team in whatever sports that you enjoy watching at that time. So I was born in Phoenix. I grew up in Los Angeles. My dad hated the Lakers. He hated Magic Johnson. That's right in the middle of Showtime. Right in the middle of those Showtime Lakers is when I was kind of coming into my basketball world, and my dad's like, "Hey, we might be living in LA. We're from Phoenix, Arizona." So, around that time is when we got Kevin Johnson. Tom Chambers is the first ever unrestricted free agent. Those teams are really, really good. So as a kid, you could root for them. It's like a lot of kids right now. If you are 11 to like 15, you're probably a big Golden State fan because that was the team that was really good during that time frame. And if you had a connection to the San Francisco Bay Area, then you were definitely a Golden State fan. So, growing up as a Suns fan, going all the way back to about like 1988.
Yeah, that would be tough. Living in LA as a Suns fan, especially like back in the yeah, I guess it wasn't that long ago where the Suns Lakers were battling the playoffs with like Kobe and Steve Nash, and I guess you probably wouldn't have been in LA at that time though,
No,
right?
I moved back to Phoenix in like 94. So like right after they lost to the Bulls, we moved back probably about a year and a half later. So I got the back end of that, and then all of the 7 seconds or less era, I was in Phoenix, or I was in the military too. So I was actually overseas when 7 seconds or less started. But I mean, true and true Phoenix Suns fan for a long, long time now.
Okay, and before I pass it over to Owen here for the next question, I just want to mention that so John is the host or a co-host of Suns Jam Session podcast, as well as a writer for SB Nation. So go check out his stuff, guys. And it's especially the Suns Jam Session. You can see his awesome background there. That saw looked like he had a great painting up there and everything. Anyways, Owen, I'll pass it off to you here for the next question.
Yeah, for sure. So, when did you start your podcast?
So my co-host and I started it right after the 2019 season. If you recall, that team won 19 total games. So it probably wasn't the best time to really start a podcast. But essentially what happened was my co-host is my brother-in-law. And we both lived together. I lived with his sister, and he was like our roommate in the third room kind of thing. And we moved out, and I no longer had anybody to talk about Suns with. After every game, living together, you're talking about the Suns all the time. So we decided after I moved out and he went to his apartment, I'm like, well, we like podcasts. We listen to a lot of things. We listen to Zach Lowe. We listen to Bill Simmons, a bunch of local stuff. And we're like, well, why don't we just start one? So as the 2019/20 season began, that's when we began our podcast, just kind of hanging out in my garage, recording audio. And then the pandemic hit, and then we learned how to utilize Zoom and things of that nature, and how to scrape that audio. And then from there, we're like, well, let's go live on YouTube after games. So when the 2020-2021 season began, we started going live after games on YouTube, and then scraping that audio and posting that via the brightsideofthesun.com and their podcast network. So it's been about 2 years now, and it's been a crazy 2 years, obviously, considering the turnaround of this team during this time frame.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'll let Ian ask the next question, but yeah, it's crazy what the Suns have done in such a short amount of time.
Absolutely. Yeah, we kind of similarly, we started this company about 2 years ago, and we have a football podcast as well. And yeah, Zoom is a big tool. Like we get to be able to speak to guys like you because of it, and it just wouldn't have happened if Zoom wasn't a thing. So it's definitely a great tool. Um, so the bright side of the sun. Sorry, no, the Sun's Jam Session podcast, is that similar to? Because I remember I was reading that you're also a podcast host of the SB Nation podcast for the Suns. Is that the same podcast, or is it two different
So
podcasts?
essentially what happened was we started the podcast. We did it for about 2 or 3 months at the beginning of the 1920 season. And in that time frame, SB Nation's site, which is brightsideofthesun.com. SB Nation has host every site. Like, what's Toronto's site?
For SB Nation?
Yeah,
Oh man, I can't remember.
I could Google it, but every team has their own site. So the managing editor of that site said, "Hey, we have a podcast on Bright Side of the Sun. You guys do consistent content because we did 3 episodes a week that we were putting out." And he's like, "Do you want to join us?" So essentially, we took Sun's Jam Session podcast, and then SB Nation and Bright Side of the Sun is where it's distributed. So they brought us in and started distributing our content. And obviously, SB or Bright Side of the Sun is a credentialed site. Our managing editor goes to the games and writes from the arena. So he has the media access. So it has validity to it. So we saw that as an opportunity for us to go, hey, this is going to give us more reach. Because beforehand, we were getting probably about 100 listens an episode. And once we go over to Bright Side of the Sun, all of a sudden it's 1,000 listens an episode. So it just, it created more opportunity and more reach. So essentially, it's like I work in hotels. I work for the Westin, and Marriott Hotels is the parent company. That's how SB Nation's a parent company. Bright Side of the Sun is the local site that distributes our content.
I see. Okay. I wanted to ask that out of my curiosity, but I'll stay with the questions that we have here. But so
It's a good
the
question.
yeah, so the let's get into the Suns a little bit now. So this team has, up until this point, has struggled since they had a little bit of success in the early 2000s, but they've really struggled since then. What in your opinion has kind of finally clicked, finally changed for this team to, they last year they didn't even make the playoffs, and here they are in the NBA finals. What has changed for them?
It's a culture thing, and I think with the Toronto Raptors, you've seen that as well. It's a team that once you get
Yeah.
the right GM in place, you get the right coach in place, and you start putting those correct building blocks together, good things are going to start to happen. Now, obviously, you have to hit on draft picks. I posted something on Twitter last night, and it was a picture of our 2017 draft or 2016 draft class, which was Dragon Bender, Marquise Chris, and Tyler Eulis. It's like a miss and a miss and a miss. So, I mean, you have to hit on draft picks. But I think the culture really changed when James Jones became the general manager and he hired Monty Williams as a head coach. And you couple that with the fact that they hit on some draft picks, allowed them to develop properly, and lost the tanking mantra. I think that was a big frustration for Suns fans locally for a while. Is the Suns never came out outright under Ryan McDonough as our general manager and said we're tanking. But when you're sitting Devin Booker for the last 20 games of the season, when you're sitting TJ Warren for the last 25 games of the season, it's like, okay, he's got a sprained ankle or a tweak in his ankle. Like, how bad is it really? Like, they're purposely trying to lose to get better draft stock. And when you have that culture, it's a culture of losing. And then you bring in Monty Williams and James Jones. James Jones, obviously, who's been a part of, I think, 8 of the last 10 NBA finals, whether it be a general manager now or as a player with all those years with LeBron. You bring in Monty Williams, who's just been a fantastic leader, a guy who wasn't necessarily successful as a head coach in his time in New Orleans, but learned a lot of lessons there, was part of the Philadelphia 76ers organization, and really had he has a really good way of leading young men. And all of a sudden you start developing this culture of, hey, we're trying to win these things. You take Devin Booker and you give him the tools around him necessary to be successful, and that's Ricky Rubio last year. And if you think about it, last year, the Suns, after that 8-0 run in the bubble, they were one game out of the play-in. If you go back to the beginning of the season, DeAndre Ayton had a 25-game suspension. Had that not occurred, they would have been a playoff team last year. And that's what a lot of people, they're like, well, hold on, you went from not making the playoffs to you're in the NBA finals. Normally there's a step in between there. You see with like the Portland Trailblazers who just haven't been able to get over the hump, but they're a team that wasn't very good. You get Dame Lillard, you get CJ McCollum, you start to build a culture. Now you're going to the playoffs perennially, and then eventually you should make it to the finals. The Suns would have made it to at least the playoffs last year had DeAndre Ayton not had a diuretic in his urine after the first game of the season and we lost 25 games. I guarantee you having him in there gets you 2 or 3 more wins and they would have been in the playoffs. So I guess it's a long way to answer your question, but it's been the culture. It's been a complete flipped 180. This was a town where no free agents wanted to come to because of their losing ways. And now you have Chris Paul here and you have Jay Crowder who both rose their hand and said, Chris Paul's like, can I go play in Phoenix? If you're going to trade me, OKC, can I play there? And once he gets here, Jay Crowder is like, okay, I want to go play in Phoenix as well. And that's the beautiful thing about culture is it's going to continue to permeate. And no matter what happens in this upcoming offseason, whether we lose players, we'll get quality players in return because they want to be a part of something special. And you have that in James Jones and Monty Williams.
Yeah, that 8-0 bubble run, in my opinion, is really where like it kind of clicked. Where I believe it kind of clicked, like, wow, this team is actually really, really good. Because you saw, like, obviously they had a decent season before that, but when they went 8-0, I was like, man, this team deserves to be in the playoffs. And it sucks that they're not gonna be there.
We all felt that way when Karis LeVert for the Brooklyn Nets decided to shoot a jumper instead of driving to the rim on that final play, because if they had won that final game, the Suns would have gotten in because they would have beat, I forget who they had to beat. But he took the jump shot and all the Suns Nation was just like, we did a live podcast right afterwards and it was very, very depressing because we were that close to getting to the playoffs last year. But now a blessing is in disguise. It worked out in the long run.
Yeah, I know Owen is a OKC fan, so I know it sucked for him when Chris Paul got
yeah. So let me ask you this, Owen. So I've never been a Chris Paul fan, obviously, because he's played in the Western Conference for every season leading up to this season. And now that he's on our team, he is like my favorite player. Did you have the same thing occur for you when he played in OKC?
I always liked Chris Paul. I
Okay.
just thought he was a fun player to watch. Like, I loved Lob City growing up, even though it was in the Western Conference. Like, Lob City was just so fun to watch. Obviously, like, growing up as a kid with some attitude, he was fun to watch too because he's a very chippy player. He's a very sassy player, plays with a lot of attitude. But getting Chris Paul, and this will lead into my next question, so it's perfect. Getting Chris Paul really showed a lot of like the development that it can bring. So with the way that DeAndre Ayton has been playing recently, like I saw a stat like he's shooting, I think like 70, like low 70% from the field in the playoffs and averaging 15, 16, 17 points. So do you attribute like that growth and that progression in playoffs to Chris Paul completely, or do you believe like that the winning team kind of all clicked together, or do you think that Chris Paul really is the X factor here?
It's 100% Chris Paul, and DeAndre Ayton will tell you that. He said it numerous times in post-game press conferences where he's like, when they first made the transaction for Chris Paul and they interviewed DeAndre, he's like, that's CP3, man. Like, wow, I've got CP3 on my team. Like, I'm excited what that's going to bring my career. And just as recently as I think it was after the Western Conference Finals when the Suns clinched that over the Clippers, he said he owes everything to CP3 and it's changed the course of his career. And it was a struggle this year. One segment that we have on the Suns Jam Session podcast is Ayton Watch. And it kind of started off as a segment during the pod where in the post game, we would sit there and we would just break down essentially what DA wasn't doing. Because this guy's got a load of talent. He's got the physical tools necessary to be successful. And he's a number 1 overall draft pick. So the expectations are through the roof on this guy. And through the beginning part of the season, he had a hard time really kind of executing within the confines of the offense. And it kind of became this debate on Suns Twitter and on different social media platforms about why is he not as effective? Is he effective and we're just not recognizing it? Things like that. I always had the stance of, one, he's 22 years old. So he's got a lot of growing to do. And two, he's not averaging nearly as much as he did the previous season. The previous season, he averaged 18.2 points a game. And this past season, he averaged 14.4. So that's almost 4 complete points less. So everybody's like, well, clearly DeAndre Ayton is not being as nearly as productive. And my big thing was like, well, 2 years ago, he was averaging 15 field goal attempts a game. And this past year, he's only been averaging 10. So if you allow him an opportunity to be ball dominant, he can execute. But he's playing within the confines of this offense and focusing on defense. And he's being a shot a rim protector, and his shot deterrence is some of the best in the league. So I think that, that was the direction of Chris Paul. Chris Paul's like, hey, this is what I need from you. Instead of listen to the fans or, listen to the coaching schemes, Monty entrusts Chris Paul to be that leader on the court at all times. And he goes, this is what I need from you. I need you to be a rim runner, and we'll learn how that pick and roll goes. And they've learned it, and they've, executed to the point now, like since the playoffs started, and even if, a couple weeks before the playoffs began, they really had it finally down to an art. And it took a long time to get there, because there'd be a lot of plays where early in the season, Ayton would set that high screen. He would roll. Paul wouldn't get him the ball. I felt like he didn't have trust in him yet. And as the season has developed, they've developed that chemistry. But I mean, early on, he's like, focus on your defense, continue to develop down there, because come playoff time, that's where we're going to need you. We need somebody who has versatility, who can, protect the rim, but also has the ability to go out on the perimeter and create shot deterrence out there. And due to Ayton's athletic ability, his lateral quickness, he can guard guards. And it's been really impressive, especially in that Clippers series when they started playing that 5-out offense in game 5. They were successful with it. And it wasn't necessarily because of DeAndre Ayton's shortcomings, but with Ivica Zubac out for game 6 as well, the Suns made the adjustment, and DeAndre Ayton was a huge part of that. And again, after that game, he attributed it all to Chris Paul. I mean, Chris Paul is like having a coach on the floor at all times. He makes all the right decisions. He processes everything so quick. I mean, just looking at this series alone, in the first game of the NBA Finals, anything that Milwaukee threw at him, whereas the Atlanta Hawks, it would take a game or two to kind of game plan against and look at film and, be like, hey, Trae Young, see how they're doing this drop coverage here? Here's probably the best way to attack that. Chris Paul is doing that in real time, and it's unbelievable to watch, because as people who watch basketball, we can sit there and watch a game while it's happening, like, oh man, look, they did drop coverage, like, attack or use the pick and roll, or Brook Lopez is coming all the way out on Chris Paul, cook him and get to the mid range. And some players just don't necessarily have the capacity to do that. And Chris Paul does it in real time. And the benefits of that go directly to DeAndre Ayton, because he's the guy who's, benefiting from it and having a good time doing it as well.
Yeah, for sure. And sorry, Ian, do you mind if I ask just one more quick question?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Just while we're on the topic of DeAndre Ayton. So I've heard a lot of people say that like the era of like the old school big is kind of died off.
Mm-hmm.
The inside the arc scorer, the inside the paint defender. Now, obviously, Ayton isn't a perfect mold of that. Like you said, he's a passable perimeter defender. Obviously, he's got a decent mid-range game, decent
Mm-hmm.
floater game. But would you say that that's true? That kind of that old school big has died off?
If you define old school as like really old school, I'm talking like 80s centers. I'm trying to think of a good example of one, because like maybe David Robinson, because David Robinson didn't have any mid-range, but was an elite defender. But I think, yes, in a way, in the same way that the old school guards are no longer, have the same impact. I mean, the point guards are really, if you look around the league, Chris Paul is the perfect definition of a point guard and how you should facilitate an offense. But that's not the norm anymore. That's the exception. The norm is the Dame Lillards, the Steph Currys, the Russell Westbrooks, the guys who are going to try to score more than they do facilitate and pick and choose their spots. So on DeAndre Ayton, I think that he is an example of what the modern big should be. And again, he's physically a freak, so it's going to be hard to emulate that. I mean, you look at like James Wiseman. I mean, he's physically a freak as well, but he's got a long way to go to develop some of those skill sets. But it's just how the NBA goes. 4 years ago, the big was dead, because you had the Golden State Warriors who could play Draymond Green at the 5 and just beat you with 5 out. But then teams start to learn how to adjust. They learn defensive strategies to go against them. And then all of a sudden now a big is playing very well in the playoffs. So the natural inclination of a lot of national pundits is like, oh, well, the big is back. It's like, well, in a way, he's a hybrid, and a lot of these guys have to be hybrid given the effectiveness and volume of outside shooting. So you look at like Rudy Gobert, for example, there's a great example. Like that is a great regular season player, but you put him in a series, it's really hard to have him on your team and win because he essentially becomes a zero on offense, and his primary defensive abilities are negated because teams just start playing 5 out on him. So you need to have that versatility. DeAndre Ayton's a great, I was listening to Bill Simmons' podcast. They were having a similar conversation with him and Ryan Russillo on just that. It's like, you have to start to find these guys who are a lot more athletic. It's harder to find. And everybody's been looking for them, I think, since the Golden State Warriors imparted what they do. But like, Anthony Davis at the 5, Giannis at the 5, that's the way it should be. But those guys want to be power forwards. You have to accept the role. And I think that's what DeAndre Ayton is, because he's 6'11". He could be a power forward. At U of A, he played a lot of power forward. And he's comfortable with that because that means you're away from the basket a little bit more. But he's embraced the physicality. He's embraced what has been asked of him by his coach and his teammates. And now he's excelling due to it.
Yeah, for sure. So you don't believe that like Ayton's kind of lack of 3-point shooting, like I don't know exactly if he can shoot threes and just doesn't. Like you said, like
he can and he doesn't.
He can and he doesn't. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think that
I love that
his
though.
Game?
Say it again.
Do you think that limits his game, or you said you love that? So
no, I love it because we don't need him to. And again, the Suns are such a weird team because they're not going to kill you with threes. They're going to kill you with mid-range. They're going to kill you with everything that analytics is against. They don't shoot from 19 feet out, but that's where the Suns make their bread and butter, because guess what? The rest of the NBA believes that due to analytics, it's either high percentage shots on the interior or it's perimeter shots that are going to win games, and they leave the mid-range wide open. And now you have a team that is full of guys who can execute in that area to the point where it's 50%, 51%. It's almost like a layup for some of these guys. So they're going against that mold analytically, and it's working out for this team. It's not for every team. It's not something that you're probably going to see permeate throughout the league, because again, the analytics say so far, to the one direction that this is the way that it should be. I expect Ayton to probably shoot a few more threes in his career. But it's almost like there was one guy on Twitter who was like, if DeAndre Ayton makes a 3 in the bubble, I'll get my face tattooed. And then he hit one, and Suns Twitter went crazy. And, the guy, went back on what he said and everything, but Ayton can shoot. I mean, you see that as a big man who can shoot free throws. I mean, that's one of the big factors in this series is going to be free throw shooting, and he can hit free throws all day. So he can shoot them. He doesn't need to. I think that the team is like, hey, focus on the mid-range, focus on getting down there, getting the rebounds, hitting the glass. You can't do that if you're standing 30 feet away from the basket.
Yeah, for sure. That makes lots of sense.
Yeah.
I just want to add, I also listen to the Bill Simmons podcast, but as a Raptors fan, I don't really enjoy his Boston Celtics bias a lot of the time.
Me too. And you got to remember, Bill Simmons has crushed the Suns for years, and didn't like Devin Booker because Devin Booker didn't go to the Olympics or Team USA stuff, and then some Celtics did, and therefore they were God, and Booker wasn't. So it's really fun hearing him go back and have to eat all of his words. Whereas Ryan Russillo has always been kind of a Phoenix guy. So I like Russillo. Simmons could drive me crazy.
Yeah, like the one year he said the Celtics were going to win over 60 games, and that was the year the Raptors won the finals, and then he was against the Raptors in the finals as well. Like he was picking against them the whole time. But
yeah, it drives me crazy. Yeah, that was the Kyrie year where he was so far up Kyrie's butt that he didn't, he didn't care.
All right. Well, I'm just going to get into the next question here. What do you think of Devin Booker? He seemed to take a big step this year, and we've heard people compare him to Kobe Bryant. Do you see that yourself?
You see aspects of his game that are Kobe-esque. Like anybody who hits a mid-range jumper the way that Booker does, and it looks like Kobe, they're going to say that, but he's not Kobe. Nobody is Kobe. And just like Kobe wasn't Jordan, they're completely different players. They do it completely different ways. I respect that Devin Booker looks up to Kobe Bryant, and he has Be Legendary tattooed on his arm after Kobe Bryant signed a pair of sneakers when they first met in Devin Booker's rookie year. So if he wants to emulate Kobe Bryant in the way that he plays and in his work ethic, I'm 100% for it. But when you have national pundits being like, he's the next Kobe, like nobody's the next Kobe, just stop. He's the first Devin Booker. But he's been absolutely fun to watch develop, because you got to remember, I mean, going back to 2015 when we drafted this kid, he was just another long line of lottery picks that you were hoping were going to pan out. And why a lot of them didn't, this kid put his head down and has done everything the right way. I've been very critical of Devin Booker over his years here because of some of, he was a big turnover guy. We did a lot of point Booker for a few years because we just didn't have point guards. So we put the ball in his hands a lot and made a lot of wrong decisions. But in hindsight, all of those wrong decisions allowed him opportunity to grow. And when you have instances like Chris Paul being out for the first 2 games of the Western Conference Finals due to COVID-19 protocols, and you get a little bit more Book at the point, you're like, oh man, he knows what he's doing, because for the entire 2018 season, that's what he was doing, because our starting point guard was Isaiah Canaan. Like, he had to do it. So his development over time, every little speed bump that he's absorbed as a member of this organization is coming to fruition. And I'm so happy for him, because he's always done it the right way. He's always said the right things. He's always said, Phoenix, I want to bring this team a championship. This is my home now. I want to be the best son of all time. I want to retire son. You don't hear that from Stephen A. Smith or ESPN. Every time the Knicks are interested in anything, they're like, Devin Booker wants to go to the Knicks. Russillo said it too. And I'm just like, there's no validity to any of that. All he's wanted to do is be a member of the Phoenix Suns. And one of my favorite, like, low key things he's doing right now is every presser he's doing in the NBA Finals, he's rocking like 93 Suns gear stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just like, he's so Phoenix that it's everything right now. He is this town, and he has this town in the palm of his hand right now. He's just amazing. And to see him perform the way he is at this level is just, it was the last big question for Devin Booker. We knew he could do it in the regular season. We knew he could do it on a bad team. We knew he could do it on a good team this year. Could he do it in the playoffs? And he's continually done. He's had some stinkers, but everybody has. But he leads this team, and he does everything the right way.
Yeah, I've been really impressed with him this season, especially in the bubble play as well. I think getting Chris Paul has been a big boost for him, because I think despite those big games he's had where he has been playing point guard in the playoffs, I think he's better off the ball, and when Chris is bringing it up, and it's I think that's been big for his career to finally have like a decent point guard next to him.
It's big time, because it allows him to be even more effective on offense and expend less energy. If he wants to use energy, he can do it coming off of back screens and trying to find open spots on the floor where he can be effective. And the other thing is, with Chris Paul on the team, you have one of the best clutch players in the NBA. So you can take the ball out of Booker's hands in the last 5 minutes, and this team can be successful. And this was a challenge for the team last year. A lot of the games came down to clutch time minutes, and I don't have the stats in front of me, but if my memory serves me correctly, the Suns were like 12-19 in clutch games last year. And it's because their primary offense was Devin Booker, and he had the ball in his hands. Like, Ricky Rubio would start the possession, and he'd dish it to Book, and it was ISO Book for the last 5 minutes. And it would drive you crazy as a Suns fan, because they did all of these great things to get themselves in a position to be to win a game. It was ball movement, it was high screen and roll, it was Devin Booker doing his thing and cooking. But when the last 5 minutes would come, all of a sudden it was just ISO Book. And the defenses knew what to do. They double team him, and with 5 seconds left in the shot clock, it would either be a really dumb shot or a bad pass that led to a dumb shot. And then this year, with the addition of Chris Paul, now we've got 2 guys who can facilitate the ball. And if one starts to get doubled, you give it right to the other one, and then you can facilitate that side of the offense. And it makes it really hard for the opposition to navigate it defensively. And it's what's led to the Suns having the best clutch record in the NBA, is something like 25-11, and in the playoffs, I think they're 12-4. So and maybe not that much, but they've been really good in the clutch, and it's something that every basketball fan wonders. That it's like, how do you get good in the clutch? Because every NBA game, no matter what happens in the first quarter, you're down 20 in the first quarter, it doesn't matter. The end of the game, it's going to be 5 minutes, and you have to be the better team in the last 5 minutes. And with Booker and Paul, the Suns have been able to do that.
Absolutely. All right, I'll excuse me, I'll pass the next one to you.
So obviously there are a lot of talented guards in the league, Devin Booker obviously being one of them. And so I've always like I've always liked Devin Booker. I wasn't sure if he could be the number one on a winning team because he had games like that 70-point game against the Celtics, I believe, where they still lost.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That was against the Celtics.
Yep.
Yeah.
70 points against the Celtics. Nice loss.
Yeah. But so I'm just wondering where you would rank Devin Booker among shooting guards in the league right now. Because obviously, like, I've had a begrudging respect for like Donovan Mitchell ever since he cooked the Thunder in the playoffs in round one. So like as much as I hate it, I have to respect that like Donovan Mitchell is a beast. Obviously Bradley Beal is an automatic bucket,
Mm-hmm.
but Devin Booker right now has led his team further than either of those two did. So I'm just wondering, where would you rank Devin Booker among shooting guards in the league right now?
That's a tough one. Let me think. So he's better than Donovan Mitchell, and I've always thought that. They're just different players. Donovan Mitchell's a volume player. Bradley Beal's a volume player too. Devin Booker's an efficient player. That's one thing I've always admired. Now, he started off as a volume guy because guess what? When you play for one of the worst teams in the NBA, you're going to get all the shots. But as he's progressed, he's learned how to create efficiency, which allows other shots to go to the rest of his team, which allows them to be successful. So when I look at it through that lens, I know that in my opinion, he's better than both of them. It's so tough because it's like, what do you classify as a shooting guard anymore? Because like James Harden can be a shooting guard at times. Kyrie can be a shooting guard at times. I think that both of them are better than Devin Booker. But I definitely think that he was worthy of an all NBA nod this year. And it was one of my frustrations. And again, you don't care about the awards, you care about the playoffs. But when you look back in history, when you go back 3 years from now and you look at this season, you go, how is Devin Booker not at least on the third team all NBA for his performance on the second best team in the NBA? And how is he a two-time All-Star that was never voted onto the All-Star team? He was an injury replacement 2 times. I think obviously a lot of that's going to change following this performance. I think that he's kind of cemented himself amongst all of the NBA elite and the writers and everybody who's now had to sit and watch his story and analyze him and give him his just due. But I mean, he's got to be like top 3 or 4 shooting guards, because Klay Thompson is another one who's fantastic, but we haven't seen him for 2 years. So it'll be interesting to see when he comes back, how he plays following his injuries and how Devin Booker performs next season, things of that nature. Because I love Klay Thompson because he's a fantastic 2-way player. That's the other side of this. Devin Booker's defense isn't overly talked about, but it's definitely improved because he doesn't have to spend as much energy running the team. He could spend a little bit more time on the defensive end. I think he had one of his best defensive rating seasons this past year, tied for it. But yeah, that's a tough one just because I don't know what defines a guard. If you say, where does he stand in the overall ranking of guards in the league? I think you have Steph Curry, Dame Lillard. I'd probably put him right after that. Yeah, probably that. It probably goes like Steph Curry, Dame Lillard, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, Tatum. He's like a forward. Trae Young is up there. But he's got a lot of learning to do. That kid needs to settle down. I'm not a big Trae Young fan.
Neither am I.
Yeah,
he's gonna be flipping burgers after next year when they put in that rule where you can't jump into players. Like that's how he gets like 10 points a game. Like he's gonna have to really learn to adjust, and we'll see what
It'll be interesting to see what that rule does for guys, especially like James Harden and stuff.
Yes, James Harden and Trae Young and Luka Doncic, I think, and push off Paul George. I think all those guys are going to have a hard time adjusting. Devin Booker doesn't really do that. He does it at times. Everybody does, but he's not known for doing that. Or maybe he is. I don't know. I'm just too close to the situation.
So what has this run been like for Phoenix fans and just for the city as a whole? Has it been pretty electric in the city?
It's unbelievable. I still feel like I'm on an alternate timeline. And like the bubble hasn't even happened yet, because everything since the bubble has just been, it's been storybook. You go into the Orlando bubble and they're not expected to do anything. They win 8 games, 8 exciting games. And I get it. I'll call it for what it's worth. The Orlando bubble wasn't like the Suns were playing the toughest competition. Okay. We played the Sixers and they had guys sitting out. We played Dallas twice and they had guys sitting out because everybody was using that as an opportunity to get their legs back under them before they actually started the playoffs. So the Suns were one team that actually took it seriously. And it showed. But what it did is it created a little bit of a buzz. And obviously for a podcaster and somebody who writes for Bright Side of the Sun, it was great to cover, because all of a sudden you were starting to see a little bit, a few more views on your YouTube stream and things of that nature. And then the Chris Paul saga began. And all of a sudden it felt like 1993, where the Suns were a good team coming off the bubble, just like in 93, the 92 team was a good team with TC and Kevin Johnson and Dan Marley, and they added Charles Barkley. They brought a free agent in that brought electricity to the city. And I mean, this happened via trade, but still you get a guy who's got State Farm commercials, who, like, my wife knows who Chris Paul is. She doesn't know who Dame Lillard is. She doesn't follow basketball, but she knows who Chris Paul is. She's like, oh, the guy from the commercials. So all of a sudden you have a face to this franchise. And as the season began, the team started 8-8, very mundane. Everybody's like, oh, I see, I told you. And by everybody, I mean Suns Twitter, because again, the casual fans, they showed up like 4 weeks ago, and it's great to have the casual fans back around. It's really funny because you get the people right now, they're breaking out all their Suns gear, like, oh, I've been a fan since the Nash area. I've been a fan since 93. It's like, you were a fan in 93, not since 93. There's a complete difference. Like, I've been watching and dying with this team for the past 10 years during this playoff drought. Welcome back, buddy. Thanks for jacking all the ticket prices up. But at the same time, when you're driving around, you got to remember, this is July in Phoenix. July in Phoenix sucks. Everybody's always just a little pissed off. You go to Circle K down the street, you go into, go get a 6-pack of beer. The attendant working behind the counter is just pissed off because it's hot. Everybody's hot. Everybody's miserable. Traffic sucks. Everybody's flipping each other off and honking because you have to sit in the heat. That's not happening right now. You go into Circle K right now, I got a Suns gear on, and they're just like, hey, go Suns. And you're like, yeah, go Suns. Like, isn't this amazing? And I've been a fan since 93. I'm like, no, you haven't. Like, name the starting point guard in 2017. Can't? Okay, that's cool. I mean, I'm not knocking you, but I'm just saying, like, your phraseology should change there. But everybody's happy. You're driving around, people have got it written on the side of their cars. Go Suns, rally the Valley. And I think that's another important part about this, is the Suns marketing team did such a great job of rolling out this whole Valley thing, which comes from Kelly Oubre. Kelly Oubre called the Suns the Valley Boys at the beginning of the 2019-20 season. Everybody started to kind of, and it's called the Valley because we live in the Valley of the Sun, and everybody started to congregate towards this Valley mantra. And then they released the jerseys and the new marketing, and then they traded him 2 days later. Poor guy, poor Kelly Oubre. So we owe you tip of the hat to Kelly Oubre. But you have that, and now you see it. I mean, the Suns haven't worn purple in the playoffs. They wear the Valley stuff every time. So just like Suns fans back in 1993, that was the debut of the Sunburst and the Charles Barkley essentially uniforms. The same thing's happening this year, where it's a whole new marketing campaign. We have a $42 million training facility that the Suns opened at the beginning of the season. So finally, they weren't in like some crusty brick gym downtown. They have this nice updated facility. They just renovated the arena during COVID. So you have all of these different things kind of lining up, the addition of Chris Paul. And all of a sudden, this team, this franchise, and this city have all converged with an amazing playoff run that it's unbelievable. Like, I get goosebumps when I think about it. I'll be driving and I'll start thinking, like, I'm like, the Suns are in the NBA Finals. I'll tear up a little bit. It's weird, man. Like, I don't know how to act because I'm a pessimistic Suns fan. I'm an Arizona sports fan, dude. All of our teams suck. All of our teams disappoint. This is the first time we've ever had a lead in a finals. This is our third time. We never led against the Bulls, and we never led against the Celtics in 1976. Like, we have a lead in the finals, like, right now. Like, what is going on? It's 111 outside, and I'm happier in hell.
Yeah, the Bulls series would have been tough when you're going up against Michael Jordan, but
yeah, what are you gonna do there?
those Valley jerseys are really nice. I've been one of those, I don't want to say closet Phoenix fans, because I've always been a Raptors fan, but I've been to Phoenix games. Like, I grew up a big Steve Nash fan, obviously, because he's Canadian.
Yep.
And I actually have like an old jersey from when I was a kid when Steve Nash was there. And then I saw Weather a couple of years ago to see Devin Booker play there, and I thought he was amazing. But yeah, it's been fun watching Phoenix, and I haven't bought any Suns gear or anything, so I'm not super hardcore, but I've definitely enjoyed watching them for sure.
Do it. Buy the Suns gear, man. Use code Suns Jam at checkout. You get 15% off if you go to Just Sports. You go to shopjustsports.com. Use code Suns Jam, 15% off. Boom. I've done my plug.
Nice. It's nice
I
when
gotta,
it's converted to Canadian dollar, which is way higher. So it would probably help me out a lot. So
I got a Chris Paul Rally the Valley jersey on the way, so I'm excited.
Heck yeah, that's what I'm talking about, man.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
So, going on to the next question. You've been a Suns fan pretty much your whole life, so this might be a little bit tough, but what's your favorite Suns memory?
Oh God. Um, God, there's so many. But see, it's tough because so many end in disappointment. Like, you can go back to that 93 series and there was a moment where Charles Barkley made this shot to win a game over David Robinson. It was just like unbelievable. It's just like, I never thought it could get better than that. And then you go to the Steve Nash era and the Raja Bell three in the corner in, I think it was game 5 or 6 against the Clippers. That sent it to overtime and the Suns won. If they hadn't hit that shot, they would have lost that series. And I mean, I thought that was one of my favorite moments. Last year's Orlando bubble, when Devin Booker hit that shot over both Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. I mean, that was up there. The Valley Oop that everybody's referencing with DeAndre Ayton in the Western Conference Finals, like that was up there. So it's really hard to pick a particular moment. I think as we're going right now, like all these are my favorite moments. Like, so I went to game 5 of the Western Conference Finals with my co-host Matthew, and I was blessed. I know some people, they got us in a suite and we got to watch LeBron walk off the court with 5 minutes left. And like, that was like top 5 moments right there. Cause I can't stand LeBron, and see him quit on his team was just like fantastic. And I was just like, this is all happening. Like, and you go into that, it's a game 5 in a 2-2 series. I'm like, I get to see the Suns in a playoff game against LeBron, and this is a huge game. And the Suns just smoked them. It was a party the entire time. I mean, like that was one of my best moments. So it's tough to pick a particular one. Different ones have hit me different ways. When you go back to being a kid, probably the Kevin Johnson dunk over Olajuwon in the playoffs in 1994 was just like, that was it for a long time for me. I just thought it was the coolest thing ever because I was a big KJ fan when I was a kid. Then the Raja Bell moment for a long time. And I think like that Lakers game for me right now rings true, but I have tickets to tonight's game. So maybe something will
nice.
happen tonight. Yeah. God bless my mom. My mom she bought tickets for me and like my wife, my brother, my brother-in-law. I'm like, Mom,
Wow.
quit spending my inheritance. Like it's all on her credit cards. I know it's not, she don't have the money, but she knows how important these moments are and how few and far between they are. So, we'll be in the arena tonight and maybe there'll be a moment tonight, but like, I can't tell you how excited I am for this evening. Like it is like an NBA finals with the Suns in it. Like I never thought I'd be able to check that off my bucket list, and it's happening tonight. So probably tonight is my answer.
Nice.
yeah, that's awesome. I got the opportunity to go to a finals game when the Raptors in game 2 in Toronto.
That's
and
awesome.
That was probably the loudest game I've ever been in my life. It was unbelievably loud. So maybe you'll experience that a little bit, but like the Raptors run, I've never seen anything like that. Like unite, like probably since like Team Canada won gold like against the US in the Olympic hockey game back in 2010. I've never
Yeah.
seen like anything unite Canada like that Raptors run did like since that Olympic gold medal game. So it was incredible.
And think of what's we just went through for the past year and how we need uniting in so many ways. And having the Suns do this in my city is uniting the city in a way that I haven't seen in so long. And it's just like to experience that, and you've experienced that with the Raptors, like you'll always remember those years. I mean, this is why we love our sports so much, is because for a brief moment in time, everything aligns and it's magical. Like I said, people normally suck when you talk to them this time of year in Phoenix. And everybody's nice and everybody's happy, and it makes everybody better people, and that's the power of sport, and that's why we watch it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's get into the finals here now. So, before game 1, before Phoenix took game 1, what chances or I guess what chances did you give the Suns to win the series? Like, did you like, oh, this, were you gonna say, Suns in 4 maybe, like with the Suns in 4 guy, or what chances did you give them
Suns in
before the
4 guy.
series?
So we did our NBA Finals preview podcast, and I said Suns in 5, and that's still where I stick at. I honestly believe, and it's weird. It's weird being this confident in a Phoenix team. I don't know how to navigate it, but at the same time, looking at basketball, taking into account everything that I've watched this season, looking at the Milwaukee Bucks roster, watching a lot of their playoff games as well, I honestly believe that the Phoenix Suns are the better team. They're you know, I pretty much broke it down to 4 different things. Chris Paul's leadership, our free throw shooting, our defense, and our depth. All 4 of those factors are why I believe the Suns can win in 5. The only reason I said 5 instead of 4 is because there's going to be a game where Middleton goes off for 45 points and Giannis plays well too. I mean, there's going to be just one game in there. It'll probably happen in Milwaukee. I hope it's not tonight, please God. That'll be one of the worst memories ever, Owen. So I don't want that to happen. But at some point in this series, they're going to have a game where everything clicks for them and the shots fall. And it's just, that's basketball. This is championship level basketball. Both of these teams are here for a reason. I don't think the Phoenix can mow through them, but I think for those 4 reasons, with the leadership of Chris Paul, the hunger that he has, the fact that this is one of the first teams ever to be molded in his image. You think back to Lob City, that was Blake's team. You think back to the Rockets teams, those were Harden's team. You think the OKC team, that was a team that was made in Chris Paul's image, and they were supposed to be the worst team in the NBA, and they got the 6th seed. Same thing with the Suns. This is a team that is built in his image, and everybody's bought into let's get Paul a championship. Again, DeAndre Ayton, number 1 overall pick, no ego whatsoever, accepts his role. Okay, you only want to give me 10 shots a game, whereas I had 14 shots last season. Cool. So with all, you take that, you take the free throw percentage, which you saw in game 1. That was the determining factor in game 1. Both teams almost had an identical field goal percentage. I think the Suns made 1 more shot. Turnovers were pretty close. Rebounding was pretty close. But you look at the free throws, the Suns had 10 more free throw attempts, but they made like 18 more free throws or whatever the number was. I mean, they're deadly from the line. You take the depth when the Suns are out there throwing wings like Cameron Johnson and Torrey Craig out there versus the Milwaukee has to go with like Jeff Teague and Bryn Forbes. It's a different kind of ball game. And I think our defense, again, this is the first time I've ever seen a Phoenix Suns team actually play consistent defense ever in my life. It's been an aberration this whole year. I've talked about it all year. I'm like, the addition of Chris Paul will increase our defensive intensity, and that's come to fruition, and we're here because of it. So my initial prediction was Suns in 5, and I'll stick with that.
Yeah, me and Owen both. I think we both picked we both picked the Suns to win last year's. I think we both said they were probably going to go win the finals as well. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Owen. I'm pretty sure you said they were going to win, right?
Yeah, I was thinking Suns in 6 or 7, but with the way that the Bucks have been playing, I don't think it'll go to 7, or it probably won't go to 6 either, to be honest.
We'll see. I mean, a lot of it comes down to Giannis and his continual health. And, I mean, that team clicked, and a lot of people talked about that. With Giannis out against the Hawks, that team clicked and had a really good identity, but they were also playing a beleaguered Hawks team that isn't very good at defense. So there's part of that. And now you implement Giannis, who's going to take up some space, isn't necessarily as explosive. His knee, he was limping on it a little bit at the end of game 1. It'll be interesting to see how he performs in game 2. But he's known for going down the lane and contorting his body, using those knees to do so. So his effectiveness, we'll see how that rolls out. And, I'll give it to him. I mean, Chris Middleton didn't have a great night. Drew Holiday didn't shoot the ball well at all. But I just think as an overall roster, PJ Tucker's a great defender, but he's a 0 on offense. So if you want your guys to rest, if you need Chris Paul to rest because he's getting hounded a bunch on offense, then go guard PJ Tucker for a couple possessions. You just take turns doing that, and that allows them an opportunity to be rested and then execute on offense. Whereas like when we played the Clippers, we didn't have that. Those were a bunch of guys who were physical wings and made you work on every possession. And the Suns overcame them. I honestly felt, I'm like, after the Nets lost, I go, if the Suns can beat the Clippers, I feel like we'll win the championship because we're better than all those other teams outside of the Nets just because of their offensive firepower, even if it was beleaguered. I mean, Kevin Durant, you never bet against Kevin Durant. Right.
Yeah, makes sense. I'm a little ashamed to say at the beginning of the playoffs, I was like, man, I really want to pick the Suns here, but I ended up picking the Lakers to win that first round.
Everybody did. That's okay.
I did. Okay. I did.
Yeah, you didn't. Yeah. All right, Owen, I'll let you take the next one here.
So just talking about the Bucks a little bit, I just wanted to point out, like, the Bucks have so much, like, they have tons of star power, they have tons of great defensive players, but they're such a flawed team when you look at it. Because, well, on paper they're a great team. They have spacing around Giannis, but Giannis is injured. Middleton is inconsistent, and so is Drew Holiday. So really, on paper, this team should be defensive, but struggle offensively. So how do you plan for the Suns to overcome really the great defensive rotational players of the Bucks?
Well, I think with the effectiveness of the Suns pick and roll as we saw in game one, there's so many variations off of that we didn't even see in game one. You know, if you run the high screen and roll and Chris Paul starts driving down the right side of the lane and they have him both covered and DeAndre Ayton, there's going to be collapsing because this is a team that likes to collapse into the paint. And we do have those 3-point shooters. You know, Jay Crowder had 1 point in the game. And if Jay Crowder starts to get hot from three, which we've seen in the playoffs, like, you're not winning that game because now you have to start defending him. Well, guess what? When you start defending him, now you don't have that assistance on the interior. So Chris Paul is going to do what he wants to do or get the ball to DeAndre Ayton and things of that nature. So I think that, you know, it is, and you're right. You know, my biggest concern coming into this series is from a starting five standpoint, every member of the Bucks is a plus defender. But then you look at their depth and, you know, with Dante DiVincenzo being out, and, you know, now you have to have Bryn Forbes in there. Now you have to have Jeff Teague. Even Bobby Portis is a step slow, I feel. You know, he had a good series against the Hawks, but, you know, those guys aren't necessarily as good on defense. So if the Suns can hang with that first team unit and keep themselves close, one thing that's been successful for this team all year long is their effectiveness with their second team unit led by Cameron Payne. You have Cameron Payne coming in there and driving. And then if the collapsing occurs, now you can switch the ball around and Cam Johnson's getting wide open threes, or he can drive as well. Torrey Craig is, you know, going to provide some of that defensive intensity, and he can hit three balls as well. So I think that, you know, it is going to be a challenge with that defense. I'm really interested to see tonight how they attack the Suns, knowing that the Suns dismantled them pretty publicly, which is the par for the course when it comes to the Bucks. Let's not lie. I mean, they got killed in game one against the Nets. You got killed against the Hawks in game one of the Eastern Conference Finals. That's kind of what they do, is they have the feel out games, if you will. So it'll be interesting to see how they respond with their first team unit. But I think overall, due to the depth of the Suns and their ability to create and generate sustained offense, regardless of who's on the court, it's going to be hard for them to continue to do it because they have to spend so much time on defense. So if they can shut down Devin Booker and Chris Paul, obviously that's huge. That's what the Clippers did for, you know, part of the Western Conference Finals. They had Chris Paul and Devin Booker combined for like 25% shooting for like 2 games. They're like 10 for 40 in one game. And then the next game, they were like 13 for 43. And that's a recipe for success. But the Clippers won one of those games and they lost one of those games because the rest of the team can step up. Again, the depth of the Suns is just something that is remarkable to see. And kudos to James Jones and the way that he constructed this roster, because that's been a big reason for their Suns winning all year long. That's the reason why they were the second best team in the NBA relative to their record.
Yeah, for sure. I agree.
I was actually, whenever when they hired James Jones, I was like, that's really, like, kind of, I wasn't predicting like that hire at all, but you've heard like LeBron talk like so highly of him about like his IQ and stuff. So it's definitely cool to see him build a team like this. But let's talk about tonight. Now I hope that you get to witness a win, but what do you think is gonna happen tonight? Do you have any predictions, or what do you think the Suns need to do to win?
It'll be a closer game. I feel obviously adjustments are the name of the game. And I think that Drew Holiday was saying it in some of his media, post-practice media sessions yesterday, where he was saying, you know, in the fourth quarter of game one is when he really started to hound Chris Paul. And that's going to be kind of his game plan moving forward. He's going to pick him up three-quarter court and just hound him, just like Patrick Beverley was doing to Booker in the previous series. And that's my expectation. He's going to try to tire him out. And again, I think that it'll be interesting to see how the Suns approach it. But, you know, if Chris Paul goes on on PJ Tucker and Tucker's just standing in the corner, you know, I think Paul can sustain that. I'm hoping for a win tonight. I'll say a 5-point victory for the Suns. I think it'll be a lot closer. But there's just so many X factors. You really can't make an educated guess because you don't know how effective Giannis is going to be. You don't know if the Suns have effectively played Brook Lopez off the floor, or they're going to, you know, stick with him, or they're going to mirror, or they're going to not start Brook Lopez. They'll start Giannis at the 5, which was effective for them in the third quarter in game one. And then the moment that DeAndre Ayton comes out, seeing as Dario Saric is now out for the season, that's when they insert Brook Lopez and try to take advantage of him. Because that's what it comes down to, the playoffs. if you have certain plays that work on certain matchups, once those matchups present themselves, you go to that thing again and again and again until the defense adjusts. We saw this in the Clipper series when Marcus Morris would back down Devin Booker on the block and then just, kind of pirouette to his left and do a, a 7-foot jumper. They must have done that play about 7 times. Anytime they had an opportunity to get points, you try to take advantage of that. So it'll be interesting to see how Coach Bud utilizes his rotations, and again, the effectiveness of Giannis. And based off of those 2 things, I think I'm just going to throw a guess out there, but I'll say Suns by 5. I should have said Suns by 4 and just done like the Suns and 4 guy thing, like Suns by 4. But I didn't. I missed that opportunity.
Are you gonna count out the seconds when Giannis is shooting his free
bet your
throw?
ass I am. It's funny though. My wife, she watched game 1 with me and she's like, I'm not doing that. The poor guy's just trying to make a free throw. That's mean. I'm like, oh my God, like, why are we taking you to the game?
You have to get your wife to join in tonight then. Maybe you should
yeah, I'm like, come on, count. Everybody in Phoenix is like, we should count in Greek. I'm like, why? Like, I'm not learning another language. That'll make him more comfortable. I don't want to do that.
Yeah, I feel like home.
Mm-hmm. Screw that.
All right, Owen, well, you can ask the next one.
Oh man, I don't even know what to ask.
Well, I can go ahead and ask then.
Yeah,
sure.
Let me think of something.
So Chris Paul had a big game in the first game, over 30 points. What did you kind of think of his game 1? Do you think he'll build off that game?
Well, again, he took advantage of what the defense was giving him, and he executed. I mean, what was it, 12 for 16 from the field, something like that? I mean, he was utterly impressive. Again, tonight will be one of those nights where you'll see him be pestered a little bit more. It'll be interesting to see how he tries to navigate the defenses thrown at him, as well as try to get them in foul trouble. I mean, Chris Paul is going to do Chris Paul things. He's going to bump into guys and flop a little bit. He's going to try to get them out of their rhythm, as in a response to them trying to get him out of his rhythm. So, I mean, I don't necessarily see him going for another big point total. I think this is going to be more of a distribution game where he's getting his teammates involved. Again, if he's driving to the rim and he's throwing it out to Jay Crowder and he's wide open, he's hitting threes, guess what? You're going to get a steady diet of that until Jay cools off. And, that'll equate to Paul having 18 points, but he'll have 14 assists. So I see this tonight as more of an assist game because the Bucks are going to try to not allow him to be a scorer in this game tonight.
Fair enough. And how big of a loss is Dario Saric for this series? You think it could be like series altering at all, or what do you think?
I mean, Dario's a bumbling, stumbling, unathletic backup big who I love to death because, he can hit some threes and he's just kind of funny to watch. I think it's big if DA gets in foul trouble. And that's another X factor. Like if Ayton gets into foul trouble, you're going to have to run a lot of small ball lineups out there. I'm talking like Torrey Craig at the 5, because I don't know how effective Frank Kaminsky is going to be at the 5. We saw that for a little bit in game 1, and they abused him instantly. It was right into Brook Lopez twice, and 4 easy points for him. So if DA gets into foul trouble, you'll miss Dario, because Dario can at least eat up minutes and be pestering enough defensively, and has a big enough body to where the Bucks wouldn't be able to take advantage of him necessarily. So I don't know if it's series altering, but it could be a game altering thing if DA has one of those games where he gets in foul trouble, which he doesn't really do very often. But smart teams target him, and the Bucks are a smart team. And I know that Giannis is going to go right at him every time he can in an effort to try to draw fouls, especially considering the Suns had 10 more foul shots in the last game. I feel like there might be some market correction in that area this evening.
Yeah, I could see the Bucks going at DeAndre Ayton tonight just because they know Saric is out, so I'm sure they'll try to get him. So then the next man in will have to come in, and then they can expose that as well. So I guess that'll be interesting to see what they do. How do you think that the Suns can contain Giannis and Middleton? I know you both talked a little bit like if those guys have big games, like it could be trouble for the Suns. Obviously, those two are their biggest threats right now. Like you see Giannis can have a big game, but Middleton has also really played well these playoffs. Those are big threats. Like how do you think that they can go ahead and contain them or try to contain them?
Well, Giannis, I think, is containable because we have Jay Crowder. I think he's a guy who can play him physical enough and push him off of his spots and annoy him enough to where it'll take him a little bit out of his game. And again, Jay Crowder's got 6 fouls, so use him on Giannis and get him to the line and make him shoot those free throws in an unfriendly environment. So, everybody always talks about.
So sorry, I would say he played good defense against LeBron as well. So
yeah, he does, and that's why you bring him here. He doesn't need to have a ton, 16 points a night. He needs to be somebody who can be a pest on defense, a physical presence. Because we have like Mikal Bridges, not very physical. He's very good. He's very long. He can steal the ball and he can block some shots, and he can, has really good shot deterrence abilities. But he's not necessarily a physical player yet in his career. And Jay Crowder is. So I think that whereas a lot of teams like to build the wall against Giannis, I think we can, with Jay Crowder and DeAndre Ayton, who played pretty well against Giannis during the regular season, I think we can limit his ability to be successful. Obviously, the other side of that is he might limit his own ability due to just his sheer physical status. We don't know how that knee is feeling. Chris Middleton's a tough one because he's like Kevin Durant light sometimes. Like when he gets in the zone, he just starts hitting everything, and there's nothing you can do. You be in his face. You could be pushing him out of bounds on a 3-point shot, and he'll still make it. So I think the best way to deter those guys is, one, play that pestering defense, be as physical as you can. But 2, if they are the guys who are going off, just limit the other guys. It's when PJ Tucker has 20 points or, Bryn Forbes or Drew Holiday. If Drew Holiday has 25 points, that is tough for the Suns because that Middleton's going to get his, that Giannis is going to get his. If you have that third guy getting his, now you're looking at just a math equation. If they're equal in 80 points, it's like, that's what you want to try to give up. So, Middleton's going to go on his runs. Giannis is going to go on his runs. Try to be as physical as possible, which is a plus of this team. The Suns are a physical team. They're an annoying team. Yeah, I know that, I've talked to other people and other fans and organizations, and, they're really physical. I'm like, good. We're finally not the finesse team. We've been the finesse team forever. The 7 seconds or less team that got thrown around and bloody noses and broken eyes and all that stuff. It's nice to be the enforcer and impose our will rather than the other way around. But that's how you start. That's how you stop both those guys or limit them, impose your will.
Okay. Well, I'll be looking out tonight to see if they do some of those things. It'll be, I think it's going to be a really close game tonight if Milwaukee goes ahead and ties up the series, and it makes it really interesting. But I think Phoenix will take both of the home games at least. Maybe they'll split the away games, but we'll see.
That's what I'm thinking, and that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Owen, you got a question?
Yeah. So obviously that DeAndre Ayton draft class, there's some big names in there.
Oh yeah.
And you guys took Ayton number 1 with players like Luka available and Trae Young available. Now I know you needed a center desperately. Do you regret that decision at all?
No, because we're in the NBA Finals right now.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what I was thinking.
But if you go back to that draft, I was on Team Luka because we also needed a point guard at that time, and I thought that Luka. I think the reasons why we drafted DeAndre Ayton are pretty easy if you understand the local environment. DeAndre Ayton went to high school here. He went to college down the road at University of Arizona. Our owner, Robert Sarver, is a University of Arizona alum. A lot of our season ticket holders are University of Arizona alums. So it was a no-brainer. And as you mentioned, we needed a center. So it was a no-brainer that they were going to take him first because it was going to sell tickets. All these people who knew of him locally playing high school, watched him for a year at U of A, were excited and knew that name. It was going to be hard to bring in a guy named Luka Doncic who played in Europe, and you had no idea. I mean, all you could see was YouTube highlights of this kid. So it made sense that we went the route that we did. I was on Team Luka because at the time our coach was Igor Kokoshkov, and he had coached him in Slovenia. And it just made too much sense to me. I'm like, oh, so you have a guy who knows this guy, and you have a guy who's won the MVP at 18 years old in the Euro Cup. Like, why not bring this guy in? We need a distributor. He'd be great next to Devin Booker. So I was very for getting Luka. Now, that being said, when we drafted Ayton, I was for that too because it met a need, and I thought this guy was a generational talent at the center position. I thought that, what I saw at U of A and him playing here locally, his frame is huge. He's a versatile center. He needed to work on his defense for sure, but he was a center who could, as I mentioned earlier, like hit free throws and had a mid-range. Like, it was very nice to see that. So once literally after we got DeAndre Ayton, I went and bought his jersey. I'm like, I'm all in on this guy now. And that debate continues and continues and continues. Luka or DA, who should we have gone? And there's, but now with the finals, like nobody cares anymore. And it's great because it's like, if you look at the sum of the parts, individually, yeah, you're going to have that conversation. But when you look at everything as a whole, like we're in the NBA finals, he's an egoless superstar. He doesn't piss and moan and whine. Luka Doncic is a hard watch as a basketball fan. He just really is. He's a hard watch. He's like James Harden meets LeBron James. And, from a physicality standpoint, but from a whining standpoint as well. And I can't stand whiners, even though I have Chris Paul on my team now. I love it when he whines. It's just adorable. Like a good neighbor, Chris Paul is there. But I think that DeAndre Ayton having no ego, accepting his role, and being willing to do whatever he can to allow this team to be successful is equating to the fact that this team is the favorites in an NBA Finals. So forever and always, it will always be we made the right pick.
Yeah, I agree, especially with the success that you guys have had. It just makes sense. And I just find it funny that like throughout these playoffs, like people have been debating like, oh, like maybe Trae Young would have been a better pick over Luka Doncic. And yet here we are, like we're discussing Luka or DeAndre Ayton. We're not even talking about Trae Young.
Yeah. Trae has some growing up to do, I think. I mean, again, he's a fantastic talent. I just feel bad for the Kings because they're the ones who swung and missed in this draft.
Yeah.
No matter what, like
always.
every one of these guys you can make an argument for because they are fantastic talents that we're going to experience for the next 15 years of basketball. Marvin Bagley will be like, who? He's Sam Bowie. He's the guy who got drafted before Jordan forever and always.
Yeah, the Kings got to be, as a Kings fan, like they got to be like one of the least equipped teams like built for the future here. Like you don't really see much bright spots in that team right now. You're like, oh my God, like what do we build out of this? But just to add on to your whiner competition, I know Kyle is definitely one of those guys, but I love him to death. But man, Kyle Lowry, he's definitely I love him to death, but man, he whines like crazy. Also to add on,
he annoys me at sometimes.
Just to add on to your we're talking about the draft here. At the time, I was like, how can like anybody not pick Luka Doncic number one here? I was like, he has to be going one. And when they picked Ayton, I was like, okay, yeah, I mean, like he is projected to be number one, even though I think Luka should be number one. And now, like looking back at it, obviously it was a good pick, and I give Phoenix a pass for not taking Luka. Although I still think that they should have, because I mean, you didn't know at the time you were going to be getting Chris Paul, so it was like, well, why not take him? But looking back at it now, obviously it was a great pick because you ended up getting Chris Paul.
Yeah,
but
it all worked out.
I give Phoenix a pass now, but the Kings in Atlanta, I'm like, how can you not take Luka? I couldn't believe it.
Well, Atlanta took Luka and traded him, because they wanted more assets. And it's just like, I mean, think about the poor Kings, like you said, like they are a team that drafts too much based on need versus talent. And that's the issue. They took Bagley out of need instead of taking Luka because they had De'Aaron Fox. But it's like, you know what? Like sometimes, like look at the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals one year drafted with their first overall pick, Josh Rosen, and the next year with the number one pick in the draft, they took Kyler Murray. Because they're like, no, this guy's better. So we're just going to get the better guy. And the Kings never do that. They always draft for need. And because of that, they haven't been able to construct a roster that puts forth wins. And I feel bad for them because they got really pretty uniforms. Like it just looks like they, it's a well-marketed team and they're just like, no, they just can't win. And you got to remember, like Memphis Grizzlies, the Suns, and the Kings were teams that have been like drafting around each other for years, trying to put it all together. And it's nice that we are the ones who rose from the ashes like a Phoenix does.
Just to give Sacramento like a tiny bit of credit, I think they did land a good target in Tyrese Halliburton.
Oh, right. Yeah. Forgot about
that. Suns fans lost their minds when that happened because that's who we all wanted. We passed on him for Jalen Smith. But if you go hindsight's 2020, would this team be where they are with Tyrese Halliburton, who would have demanded minutes from Cameron Payne? Instead, we got Jalen Smith, who gets no playing time, is a big, and is learning, and maybe in a year or two will have the capacity to be somebody who's effective on this roster. So again, I've just learned to trust James Jones. Like when you took Cameron Johnson, you're like, who? When he took Jalen Smith, you're like, who? Like, it's never the guy you think you're supposed to get because he's 15 prospects down the list, but all of them have worked out so far. But Tyrese Halliburton's nice.
Yeah.
I just got a couple more questions here for you before we let you go. But just wondering, do you have a favorite Suns player of all time?
I do. It's Sean Marion. I loved The
Wow.
Matrix. He did everything. He's a guy, you go back and look. So the 2005, 2006 season. So that's the year after kind of the Suns took the world by storm, won 62 games. Going into that next season, Amari Stoudemire got hurt before the season began. He got microfracture knee surgery. And we were without him. And we're like, oh, great. Typical Suns. Like, we have a fantastic roster. We have an opportunity. We're favored to win the finals. And then we lose our star center. And then Sean Marion stepped up and, he was getting like 20 points and like 14 boards a night. He was just that Swiss Army knife type of player. I'm typically a fan, whether it's in football, like I always like the defensive players better, linebackers and cornerbacks, defensive ends, things like that. In basketball, I like guys who play defense. So, because it's a rare thing to see, it takes so much more focus. Anybody can go out and shoot threes. It's like, how do you defend that? It's really tough. And Sean Marion was just so unbelievable to watch. The highlight dunks that he got from Steve Nash were just legendary. And he did so much for that team that I still don't know if he gets enough credit. He's not the team's Ring of Honor. He never made an all defensive team, which blows my mind. So I just feel like he's kind of that underdog, ultra defender that was just so much fun to watch. And so many people try to make the comparison with Mikal Bridges and him. It's like just stop that. Like, he did everything. Mikal's good, but Sean Marion did everything, and he's what kind of started that whole era. We drafted him in '99 out of UNLV. And then, everything kind of started to fall into place after we had Sean Marion. There would have been no 7 seconds or less without him. So, number 31, Sean Marion, favorite Sun of all time.
Yeah, his shot was interesting too. Very awkward to look at.
Yes.
But it was effective.
but nothing was ever designed for him. He was a player who had never had plays drawn up for him. He was still so effective. Did he play for Toronto a little bit?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, because Brian Colangelo left here, went there, and he brought him with him.
Yeah, I think it was just one season. I think it was just one season. Didn't last long, right. But yeah. The I loved those teams like Steve Nash, Stoudemire, and then Marion, and then Richardson.
Yes.
As well. Those were great. That was a great team.
They were fun to watch, man, but they didn't play any defense.
All right. Well, one final question here for you. It's something we ask all of our interviewees here at the Amateur Agency. It's a big one here. I don't know. In Canada, we have something called craft dinner. I don't believe it's called that down in the States. But do you put ketchup on your macaroni and cheese?
No, I've never heard of such a thing.
Thank God. We have two hosts over on our football podcast, and they're big ketchup on macaroni and cheese. Like they'll die on that hill. I know, right?
But why? So obviously, I'm a huge Suns fan. My civilian job, where I'm at right now, I'm a food and beverage director. We have managed mac and cheese on the menu. Ketchup doesn't go near it. It's
That's good to hear. Yeah. Do you ever have people requesting it at all, or not?
Nope. And we get a lot of Canadians here. No, none of that. We get a lot of requests for poutine.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like cheese curds, gravy on fries. Sounds delicious.
Have you ever had it before?
Oh, hell yeah. It's delicious.
Okay, good. I was going to say you're missing out if you haven't. So.
No, it's fantastic, but I'll never try ketchup on mac and cheese.
Good to hear. I'll report it back to our other hosts there on Football Podcast.
Please do.
All right. Well, where can the folks find you on social media or any other place you want to give a shout out to?
You can follow the podcast. It's at Suns Jam on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. I think I've got it there. It's on YouTube and Twitch, Suns Jam Session Podcast. You can follow me. I'm at Darth Voita. That's Voita. And my co-host is at Matthew Lissy. And then we both write for brightsideofthesun.com, which is where you get the best Phoenix Suns content on the interwebs.
All right. Well, we appreciate you coming on a lot, and we hope that you can see a win tonight. Hopefully they'll go up 2-0 in the series here.
No, I really appreciate you guys having me, and let's go Suns. I want to be like Toronto. I want a championship.
Absolutely, it's a good feeling, and maybe when they win, I don't want to jinx it, so I don't want to say when they win, but we'll have you back on if they win the championship. Then
It'll be me on here for an hour just crying. It'll be fantastic. It'll be artistic. Just I'll cry. I'll be dry heaving, crying. I'll do the bawling crying, the tearless crying. You'll get all different aspects. So I would love to come back when we win.
Awesome.
When? Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot, guys, and as always, thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you guys next week.
See ya.